Welcome to In the Pod, the podcast for technology vendors looking to do better marketing. My name's Dave Jones, and today I'm delighted to be joined by one of my favorite marketing professionals. He's a true thought leader, and he's someone who knows an awful lot about how to use storytelling in a business context. Strauss is CEO of Innovation Protocol and has worked with global giants such as PayPal, Google, and my favorite, Lego. And his LinkedIn profile that I read a little bit earlier today describes him as a brand strategy teacher, preacher, and firm founder. That's fantastic. And I can't wait to get into this conversation today. So without further ado, Sasha, welcome to the pod.
So glad to be here with you, Dave. Great to see you. It's been awesome to collaborate in the past, and I'm honored to be invited to do this podcast with you.
Great stuff. I'm so looking forward to this. So let's get things kicked off. Sasha, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about Innovation Protocol, and tell us about some of those clients that you work with.
Sure. Well, I'm a brand strategist, which is basically like a management consultant that advises the C-suite on how to define who the organization is, why it matters, how that shows up in products and services, and defines the way that the sales team sells, defines the experience, the customer experience, the employee experience. Now, some of the brands that you mentioned, like PayPal or Google, you would suspect that they already have brand stewardship inside their organization, but much like getting advice from your family on your personal relationships, they're too close to you. They know you too well. And so most of the world's leading organizations, religions, corporations, nonprofits, for-profits, they seek outside counsel, specifically from brand strategy consulting firms. One last note about the teacher-preacher piece. I love my career. I'm so lucky to have found it very early on in my life, and I've been able to do it for quite some time. And so as soon as I found it, I started teaching about it. So I've been a professor for a long time, and I teach at business schools from all over the world how to do brand strategy. And then every so often, I get to give a speech about it at conferences and summits and such. So that's the brand strategy work. My business is called Innovation Protocol, and we've been in business 16 years.
Fantastic. Thank you. And it was one of those conference sessions that we first came across each other. It was a few years ago now. And one of the things that I remembered so vividly from that was the way you talked about using storytelling to enhance the marketing that's done by software vendors. Tell us a little bit more about how storytelling and marketing and software vendors all sort of come together.
Well, the audience is the same, whether you're trying to teach religion or tech. And it's a human being who is distracted by their life, distracted by their income, distracted by the weather. And religion taught us a long time ago that if you want people to remember anything, you can't just administer rules. You can't just say these are the limits and capabilities of the technology, like it or don't like it. You have to immerse them in a dialogue that they can recall and relate to and push against and such. Now, classically we call that storytelling, but what is storytelling really? It's trying to transfer information, but doing it in a way that is easier to remember. And so when it relates to tech marketing and product marketing and otherwise, features and functions obviously matter, but a human has to use them. A human has to speak on their behalf, has to train others about them. And therefore that human audience needs to care. And storytelling is what makes the data stick. It's what makes the tools stick. It makes the tech stick. And that's why storytelling has such a part in technology marketing.
Now that makes perfect sense to me. Some people would say that I've been telling tall stories all my life and all my business life at least, but that's fine. Can you give us some good examples of brands, clients of yours, tech vendors that have used storytelling to good effect?
Absolutely. So we have a microchip client that's one of the top 5 microchip manufacturers in the world. And, most of the time you think about microchips based on temperature, size, application, etc. And although those things do matter when you have a commodity market like microchips, they often are the same size, they often are the same temperature. And so inevitably there has to be an additional dialogue that helps the builders spec in these components into whatever they're making, whether they're building a factory or an automobile or a smart home device. So this client of ours, who's been a client for 6 years, came to a point where every time they were scoping a deal, it came down to 0.0001 cents on each chip, which basically became an unwinnable argument because that one other manufacturer who desperately needed that deal was willing to take that hit. And honestly, how much were they actually saving? It was negligible. It was just simply a way of deciding between one vendor and another. So our client eventually cracked and said, how do we get past this hump? How do we get our clients to think about us first, prefer us, deposition a competitive offering, not have an argument based on price or delivery times? And that's where they realized that in the end, these chips were being bought by a human decision maker. That human executive decision maker had teams around them that were engineers and innovators and developers, etc. But those are humans who want to care deeply about their work, feel connected to their choices. And so what we were able to help this microchip company do is realize that every single one of the humans I just mentioned, by nature, is skeptical. What I mean is the survival skill in each of us is to not just take things for face value. You say temperature, you say speed, you say size. Oh, really? Let me see, let me know more. And to take that skepticism and build it into the pitch, to actually make it part of the conversation. So classic storytelling is not just situation that gets better, better, and better, and wow, the person is saved. Classic storytelling is there was drama, there were restraints, there were interruptions. And so what we basically did is we gathered the sales team and extracted all the doubts that they hear in the sales pitch, all of the concerns about smart home technology, all the concerns about wearable tech, all the concerns about smart cars becoming basically robots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and built those dramatic concerns, those pauses into the sales pitch, where the conversation opens up talking about the revolutions in smart tech, the power of chips today, et cetera, but then dives right into, but the concern is cybersecurity. The concern is updates and software management and rights management. Oh, all these concerns are justified, and therefore that's why we, as a manufacturer, do these things, sell them this way, and help you spec accordingly. And by creating that dramatic dialogue, that introduction to the challenges, to the opportunities, the client sits back and it says, all right, well, you've already voiced what it was that I was concerned about. That means that you're way ahead of the conversation. You get what challenges I'll confront, and therefore I'm much more likely to trust you and buy from you because of your forward thinking, clarity, understanding, and acknowledgement of the challenges that I'll confront.
Great example. And I'm seeing you doing this sort of motion as you're talking, right? And one of the things I remember you talking about when we met last was the idea of a storytelling arc. And I think I can see one on your wall behind you as well. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, first, I'm not the inventor of story arcs. There have been plenty of great minds, Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Campbell, who basically audited the world's most influential channels, content creators. Those are primarily religions in their origin, but then governments and communities who recognized that they were trying to transfer knowledge, but that knowledge transfer was met with resistance. And so they added characters and incomes and outcomes to make it sticky and memorable. So I, as a speaker and professor, know that my audience really, really needs to connect. Otherwise, I'm not going to get hired to be a professor again. I'm not going to get hired to be a speaker again. And so I went back to my life and acknowledged, where was I convinced? Where was I moved to want? And I'll tell you a quick story because it's a perfect example. When I was 18 years old, there was a commercial on television here in the United States by a car company, Nissan. And it was basically a situation where the camera opened up into a home, a family home, but you saw no humans. And you were clearly in the little boy's room. It was messy, the bed was unmade, and what you saw on the floor was a G.I. Joe action figure, an American toy of a soldier. That G.I. Joe action figure jumps up, looks around, and jumps into a remote control car, which was a Nissan Z, the sports car of the time. There's rock and roll playing. He drives the car down the hallway, runs into the cat, slides into the little girl's room. Clearly, it was pink and had girly stuff, and lands right in front of the Barbie house, where he honks the horn, and Barbie leans over the roof and looks down and sees G.I. Joe and the Nissan Z. And then what do you know? Barbie's permanent boyfriend, Ken, then leans over the ledge and looks down and looks at Barbie. And Ken is wearing a cable knit sweater and is all prim and proper. Barbie looks at him, looks at G.I. Joe, throws her tennis racket, runs downstairs, comes out in a mini skirt, high heels, and a crop top, and jumps in the car with G.I. Joe, and he drives off. Now, anyone who is a product maker, product marketer would say, why can't you just tell me about the performance, the price, the features, the functions of that car? Well, you could, but there were equally as high output vehicles available from local manufacturers, European manufacturers who had more sports car origins. But Nissan realized that the most effective way to get someone to care and pay attention was to create a story. G.I. Joe showing up in this room, jumping in this car, driving down the hallway, engaging Barbie and getting her to jump in the car and drive off with him. That created something that was so memorable. It actually unlocked my career, where I asked myself at the end of that commercial, why do you want a Nissan Z, Sasha? Why are you so convinced? And it was because they were able to get past what I was reading about in car magazines, features, speeds, and functions, and get into what it meant to be a human who had desires, girls. So all that to be said, that was me at 18. Now, I'm far older now, and I've been working in brand strategy for a very, very long time. And as I work for the world's leading organizations, religions included, I have helped them understand that their challenge is not that they're not an expert at what they do. It's that their audience is not, or that their audience has other high priorities. They've got HR responsibilities. They've got IT responsibilities beyond product function. And so in order to convert those audiences, they deserve to be immersed in a dramatic dialogue. So as you were mentioning here on my wall behind me, as I'm trying to engage my graduate students and my audiences, first of all, I don't just give speeches, I listen constantly. One of the unintended consequences of COVID was that webinars blossomed, conferences became virtual. So I've attended more conferences and heard more speakers in the last 2 years than I could ever have heard before. And so I'm constantly indexing the data, constantly tracking the insights and making notes to myself. Now, it would be all lost because my memory is not good enough to just put these in a pile. So what I constantly do is I tack them to my wall based on this story arc, which you can see here. It is this opening session that drops to all the challenge, the drama, the frustration that's expected. And then it goes off into the horizon talking about the wonderful outcomes that are possible. And so as I'm writing speeches, I just turn to the wall, get the data point that would add the color within the dialogue so that I can complete a conversation that sticks, that can be remembered, and that is retellable. And so that's the answer to the question about the story arc.
That's fantastic. And I know this is going to stick with people because it's not many podcasts that you come onto that you hear all about G.I. Joe and Barbie. So that's fantastic. Tell me, within the marketing team, right, is there a particular profile of person or type of organization or geographical bent that get this more than others?
Yes. So I'll just say that Americans, American businesses, American marketers not only get this, they buy this, they seek it out. They put on summits for their product teams, and their guest speaker is a storyteller. Europeans in the last 15 years have become much more comfortable with this, especially as they try to adapt to digital marketing and digital transformation, which really means you're getting far less face-to-face exposure to your customer. You're having to touch them with 10 or 12 digital touch points in order to get them to pay attention. But where there is grand opportunity is East Asia. It's unbelievable. Yeah, my clients in Japan, Korea, China, etc., they are more conservative, more fact-based, much more like, don't tell me a story, tell me about the value. But they are also realizing that their markets are global and that their audiences aren't just regional. And so they're having to come to the painful truth that there's no way to get an audience to buy from you unless you engage them in a conversation, a dialogue, a story that helps them see the widget in the context of an experience. So that's my answer. In first place, and it's not because I'm an American, it's just I'm a marketer. In first place is America, because America has always been about stories. The founding of this country, trust me, it's a story. It's not as it's been told. It's all been like, we have a holiday called Thanksgiving where apparently our pilgrim immigrants sat down at a table with our first Native American Indians and had dinner. That didn't happen. Yet every American celebrates Thanksgiving and we tell that story in our mind. We were not kind to the natives, please. But that's the point. America was raised on storytelling. Europe has paid attention, especially as American digital brands have infiltrated. And so now I'm watching my European clients quickly get on board to the notion. And then unfortunately behind Europe is East Asia, where they're resistant because of the moral character, the fortitude, the modesty that comes with being from China and Korea and Japan. Modesty. Don't talk about yourself. Don't be a personal brand. Don't tell stories. Speak to the truth. Speak to the facts. And that's what I want to just correct quickly. Storytelling does not require distortion. Storytelling is simply the sequence of data in a manner that is more memorable.
Interesting. And you've just burst my bubble, by the way. Are you telling me that Hamilton is not a historically accurate story? Yeah, oh, what? It's burst. It's gone. You've done it forever. No, seriously. You mentioned during the last answer that the Europeans are catching up slowly.
Yeah.
Has the use of storytelling changed over the years in a wider context, though?
Yes, and the major change has come with the adoption of video. So you already know that most information consumed in the world is consumed via video. People don't like reading. Now, even though blogs are very impactful, newsletters are very impactful, what's more impactful are things like this. Even in very technical categories, a video gets much more use and reuse than a written dialogue. So that's the difference, is that we finally have the data bandwidth. We have the internet capacities for most people, and they have the devices with fast enough processors and high quality enough screens. So video is just the perfect vehicle for stories. So that's where I really do think the change has taken place, is the internet capacity, the technology comfortability, the accessibility of devices to consume video has really changed the outlook and understanding of storytelling in Europe. And that's what I think the major catalyst is.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think everyone can see that the video is coming, and the storytelling techniques that people are now using through video has come on leaps and bounds in the last 18 months even, right?
Oh my gosh. Again, COVID has been a catalyst that has changed the way that people see and consume information. I'll just give you one example. One of my clients is the association of all of the news stations in Europe. It's the European Broadcasting Union, where every news channel is a part of this association. And it was so interesting. They were really resistant to social media. They didn't like the idea that people were getting their news from social media. And they really wanted to stick to their guns and stick to the classic channels like published papers and things to that effect, which you raise your eyebrow because you get that you pick up a paper now and you're like, well, this is old. Like, this news is 24 hours or a week old. And so what's basically transitioned is that because it's so cheap and easy to make video now, you don't need the big equipment. You don't need the cable. You don't need the satellite dish. You take your smartphone when it has a high resolution camera, a processor, and an internet connection, and video can be rendered anywhere. So all the news broadcasters, all 70 of them in the greater European and Western Middle East and North Africa region, have converted to realizing that social media, specifically TikTok and Instagram stories and Facebook stories, is actually a primary channel, not a secondary channel, not a marketing vehicle, but a primary channel, because that's where people go to get stories. And so it's really transitioned the European broadcasting news channel environment to recognize that we want the news, but we need it told in a way that gets emotional triggers, that is easy for us to consume. We can sit on the couch with our family and consume it. And I'll add a really interesting nuance. We've both been celebrating the power of video. Get that. But the most watched videos in the world have subtitles. So even if you are putting together the most epic video with the most powerful graphics, without subtitles, you lose about half of your audience because people often are around others while watching videos, and the subtitles bridges that gap.
Great advice, really subtle nuances. And I'm going to get even more advice out of you now. Let's get practical for a few seconds. Someone's listening to this and you've convinced them, right? You're a great storyteller. You've convinced them that they need to embed storytelling into their marketing. Where do they start? How do they get things moving?
Take whatever piece of communication you're already rendering, an executive presentation, a newsletter, a podcast, etc. Identify the skepticism and doubt that your audience naturally will have with no judgment. Love them for their skepticism and embed that in the middle of the dialogue. That's the quickest, fastest way to create somewhat of a story experience. Your upfront is, hi, I'm a product marketer. These are the technologies. These are why they matter. But you're right to be skeptical because XYZ challenges, ABC concerns, oh my gosh, consumer behavior, oh, budgets, etc. And then wrap up with your solutions, the opportunity that your solutions unlock, and then how to engage and partner. And that simple, quick action of putting words to the doubts and embedding them in the dialogue is the quickest, fastest, easiest way to start the story process.
Great stuff. That might feel a little bit alien to some people, right? I'm going to put words into salespeople's mouths, but they try and avoid those confrontational objections, if you like. But what you're saying is let's embrace those. Let's get those into the middle of the dialogue and then address them proactively.
Well, the number one feedback for salespeople is, I don't trust you. You're a salesperson. I don't trust you. So how do you put that to rest? How do you change their perception of you? Well, you build trust by acknowledging their doubts, but you put words to those doubts, and therefore you own and control them, rather than them having to say, well, you haven't mentioned anything about cybersecurity. Well, you haven't mentioned anything about user uptake. Well, that warrants their distrust. But by you being the one that brings them to their attention, then they sit back and realize that you're considering all their concerns. You have built that into your solution, and therefore they will trust the pitch that follows. That's where the arc ends on what your solutions are and how they relate. If you just come at me with, we've got the bestest, the fastest, the newest, the coolest, the most innovative, I'm going to naturally respond like, well, you're selling to me, so of course you're saying those things. But by embedding those doubts in the dialogue, you immediately unlock the potential for trust and change the perception of you as a salesperson.
Awesome. So you're controlling the dialogue. And Sasha, you're great conversation today. You're someone who I know controls your own dialogue and your own future and where you're going. Tell us some things about what you're up to at the moment. What's exciting and new in your world?
What's really exciting in my world is that for the last 20 years, I've been barking about employer branding, the idea that where you work deserves to have a defined and intentional experience that affects the way you feel about your coworkers, your product outputs, etc. I received lots of resistance, lots of like, no, that's HR's problem. And HR responds like, look, I'm just trying to hire and retain. Don't talk to me about storytelling. Don't talk to me about the story of this organization. But what COVID has caused and what the great resignation, the great realignment has caused, remote work and hybrid work, what that has caused is it has forced organizations to wake up to the truth that if their workforce is not mentally and emotionally engaged, they're going to leave. They're going to get poached, recruited, extracted. And so what's happening now that I'm happy about is that all employers are coming to the painful truth that if there isn't a story about this place, where we come from, where we're going, why we do this work, who we do it for, and why you're a part of it, you've got an employee problem that is never going to get solved. And so that's my biggest recommendation to anyone listening to this podcast is Your product, it has value. It will get sold. You're one of the few options, so fine. Workforce, replacing them is so costly and distracting. That's where your losses rest. So focusing on what it means to be a part of this organization, why this organization is unique and interesting and relevant to the degree that they can go to the pub with their buddies and celebrate where they work. That's the kind of stuff that's going to create the durability and the revenue that will get you through any economic lulls.
Sasha, that's fantastic advice. And I think a great way to wrap up the podcast. I had a feeling this one was going to be a good one. You've surpassed those expectations tenfold at least. Sasha, thank you so much for joining us today.
An honor. Again, Dave, it's great to see you, and congratulations on all your growth. Your podcasts have been awesome. Each one of them has impact. I've been following all of your guests. Just what a great collection of people. And really, thank you for including me in this process.
You are more than welcome, sir. And for everyone that's listening, my name's Dave Jones. This has been In the Pod. Until we see you again, stay safe.